Leftist internet has been buzzing about a potential general strike aimed to occur on October 15th, 2021.
Good morning. Good news. It's about time for a general strike, and you're probably hearing a lot about the one scheduled for October 15th, 2021.
The goals of the general strike are laid out in the many infographics being spread around Reddit and Twitter. A $20 minimum wage, 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, healthcare, a 4-day work week, environmental regulations, and a 25% corporate tax rate. For the record, I do believe that society should move towards the aforementioned demands of the general strike, but I very much do not support the October general strike. Because all this general strike will do is disenfranchise leftists and push society further away from these ideas. There are several red flags that immediately jump out, the first being the date. All of the infographics for the general strikes tells us to visit octoberstrike.com for more information. The website domain for octoberstrike.com was just registered on July 2nd, 2021. The strike is supposed to occur on October 15th, 2021, meaning there's only 3.5 months of planning and preparation for this general strike. Now, there are many reasons why this is a problem. To quote Joe Burns, author of the books Reviving the Strike, How Working People Can Regain Power and Transform America, unlike real strikes, which take a ton of work, calling a general strike is apparently a simple affair. A date is picked, a Facebook post is created, the labor media press picks it up, and a general strike is born. This raises the question of under whose authority they are being called. Successful strikes take years of hard work and preparation. The organizers need to gather support of all of the major unions around the country. Given the high risk, high reward nature of strikes, no union with any sort of reputation has understandably backed the October 15th general strike. People will try to say that unions don't need to support a general strike, but that betrays a complete lack of understanding on how unions work.
As of right now, the strike has no organizational or union backing. It's just a website and a bunch of social media pages that all seem to be run by different people. But it's also important to note that that doesn't matter. It doesn't need a clear organization for it.
Nobody in a union can join a strike unless everybody, literally every single person, within the union strikes alongside them. The decision of whether or not everybody will be striking is decided by a vote within the union. And spoiler alert, they almost never pass. Do you remember the February 17th, 2017 general strike? No? That's because they didn't get any major union support. No union support, no strike. This lack of union support isn't too surprising given the fact that the main website is littered with inconsistencies and falsehoods. One of the reasons why the October Strike website says you should go on strike is because the average American is $90,460 in debt just to afford basic necessities like housing, food, clothes, education, and medical bills. The website links to a debt.org article from May 2021, and sure enough, if you scroll down, you'll see a blurb stating that the average American has $96,400 in debt, according to a 2021 CNBC report. That includes all types of consumer debt products, from credit cards to personal loans, mortgages, and student debt. But if you scroll down a little bit further to the section titled Debt and Income, you'll see that it literally opens with, the wealthier you are, the more likely you will carry debt. Americans in the top 10% by income have a median of $222,200 in debt, whereas those at the bottom have less than $20,900. Yes, as the October Strike website points out, people go into debt just trying to buy their basic necessities. But the vast majority of the average American debt is $90,000 isn't from minimum wage workers just trying to eke out a living. It's the result of the mega wealthy leveraging their money to buy expensive housing developments, which is a problem in and of itself, but saying that $90,000 in debt from basic necessities is just flat out untrue. Another example of how the website not even reading the source material before using it as a claim for why we should go on strike is unemployment rose to 14% in 2021 because companies refuse to pay wages. Octoberstrike.com linked a United States Congress study as evidence of this claim. But the problem is, I actually read all 28 pages of the research, and there's no mention whatsoever about unemployment being driven by companies refusing to raise wages. Now, I don't doubt that companies are refusing to raise wages, I myself was not particularly enthused about having to take a 10% pay cut in 2020 and 2021 as a result of the pandemic. The pandemic fucked up global supply chains in all industries, the effects of which we're still feeling today. But there's no evidence that unemployment was driven by a reluctance to raise wages, at least not in the congressional study that the October strike website is referencing. Immediately following the lackluster reasons to strike are the demands. There are several problems with the demands, the first of which being the 4-day work week. Yes, there are certainly numerous studies which show that workers who work for 4 days a week and take 3 days off are more satisfied, which translates to more productivity in the workplace. It's a win-win. The employers pay 4/5 of the previous wage for a more effective worker, and the employee has more time to rest up and pursue their own hobbies and interests outside of work. Everyone's happy. A rising tide lifts all boats. But the problem with having a 4-day workweek be the demand of a strike is that, well, it's demanded of the companies. Strikers can demand a 4-day workweek all they want, but corporations that fall in line aren't forced to meaningfully change their internal working structure. The fact that the planners of this general strike didn't think to specify their demands as 4 8-hour days a week doesn't bode well for its potential of success. Oh, you want a 4-day workweek? Sure, I'm your hypothetical employer, and since you're so passionate about working 4 days a week, I'll let you work 4 days a week. But they'll each be 12-hour days, so now you're working 48-hour weeks. On that note of not specifying their demands, what does healthcare even mean? That's the most vague demand any strike has ever come up with. What sort of healthcare do you want? What plans should be provided? I know this all sounds like common sense shit that can all be sorted out later, but again, to the previous point of preparation, if the strikers don't lay everything out in precise language stating exactly what they want to the most minute detail, then the corporations would just find a loophole to exploit. On the subject of loopholes, I found a bit amusing that the headlining demand is a 25% corporate tax rate, followed by, in parentheses, no loopholes. This is exactly why the October strike won't accomplish anything beneficial. What loopholes are we talking about here? Be specific. I assume that the writer is referencing the ability for businesses to carry over losses into the future. That's the famous accounting trick that lets Amazon not pay any federal taxes. If that's the case, then just say, we demand the abolishment of loss carry forward and loss carry back on the website. I'm assuming that the organizers of this general strike don't actually know how businesses are able to operate without paying taxes, and they couldn't be bothered to learn how it's done, so instead they just threw up a no loopholes as a hopeful catch-all. Another instance of the strike organizers being too vague is the demand for stricter environmental regulations on corporations, ban single-use and microplastics, and limited emission. But bringing it into the details, what sort of regulations do we want on the corporations? Also, which specific corporations are we targeting? All corporations? Are we going to hold ExxonMobil to the same standards as GameStop? How much time will the corporations have to adopt the new regulations? PepsiCo is one of the world's largest consumers of plastic, despite all their PR trying to give us the impression otherwise. We'll need to give PepsiCo and the other similar corporations time to transition into a more sustainable business model. But how much time should we give them? What punishments will the government enact if they don't successfully switch over? What does limited emissions mean? How much emissions is acceptable? Which chemicals are allowed to be emitted and which are prohibited? These are all vital questions which need answers years before the general strike is called, not 3 months before the general strike day. And on that note, why is a general strike only 1 day long? Successful general strikes take weeks to months to complete. The Seattle general strike of 1919 lasted for 5 days and didn't accomplish anything except kickstart the Red Scare, pushing the country further away from socialist ideas. The Minneapolis General Strike of 1934 also didn't really lead to much other than the police opening fire on groups of picketers. This isn't to say general strikes never accomplish anything. The Toledo Auto Strike of 1934 and the 1934 West Coast Waterfront Strike both led to the formation of industrial unions, but both of those strikes lasted 52 and 83 days. The October strike lasting just one day isn't going to accomplish anything beneficial. Not showing up to work for one day isn't going to collapse the country's economy. Nearly 15% of American adults were unemployed in April 2020, and the economy still managed to get by. We'll need at least 15% of the country not working for an extended period of time, like how it was in April 2020, in order to have any actual chance of bringing change. But since the strike is just for one day, we'll need a lot more than just 15% of the workforce. According to Joe Burns, the aforementioned writer and expert, half the population striking for one day will cause $21 billion worth of damages to the American economy. 21 billion does initially sound like a lot, but our GDP is $21.43 trillion. A $21 billion loss is less than 0.1% of the country's entire GDP. And that's assuming we can get half the country to participate in this general strike. Do you really think that more than half the country will participate in this strike? This is the same country where Donald Trump won 46.8% of the popular vote in 2020. I think it's safe to say that the demographics who voted for Donald Trump won't be participating in this October general strike. Which leaves us with just a 53.2% of the adults. The bulk of this 53.2% are made up of the Democratic establishment, moderates, and the Republicans turned off by Donald Trump. In order for the strike to have an impact of just 0.1% of the GDP, only 3.2% of the collective Dems, moderates, and Republicans can opt out of protesting on October 15th. How likely is it that the October strike can get nearly every single Democrat, moderate, and Republican on board with striking? Not that I can blame them for opting out. There's no plan for the strikers. An actual strike has a fund of money that the strikers can dip into while they spend months striking. Has the October strike managed to establish such a fund? How will the strikers pay their rent? How will they eat food? How will they take care of their children? How will they buy their life-saving medication? The October strike website says that people who won't be actively striking can still help out by signing the petition on change.org. Signing your name on a website is the absolutely easiest thing anybody can do to show support. It doesn't result in them potentially losing their only source of income, and can be done while laying on the couch wearing pajamas. Despite the complete ease of signing a petition, there are currently only 5,569 signatures at the time of this video's recording. 5,569. And the strike needs tens of millions of people to do the much harder task of actually going through with the strike in order for it to be successful. Another way, according to the October strike website, is to help out by not buying anything on October 15th. But that literally doesn't accomplish anything. Starbucks doesn't care that you didn't buy a latte on October 15th if you still buy one on October 16th. Old Navy doesn't care that you didn't buy a pair of jeans on October 15th if you still buy one on November 15th. Ford Motors doesn't care that you didn't lease a car on October 15th, 2021, if you still go ahead and lease one in October 2022. No, the stock prices aren't going to go down because of a one-day strike. The bulk of investors invest for the long term. The 401k and different types of IRAs are examples of some massively popular investment vehicles, and their whole purpose is to help people save up for their retirement. A one-day strike over the course of somebody's decades-long life is just a drop in the ocean. It's the tiniest of blips on the radar. No investor worth a thimble of salt is going to panic sell their investment over a one-day strike. The October general strike organizers can say not to engage in capitalism for as long as possible. But how long will that actually be? Just the nature of the fact that we live in a capitalistic society means that everybody will be required to participate in capitalism. The only thing that somebody that, let's say his name is Todd, striking on October 15th will accomplish is their subsequent termination on October 16th. Todd's employer doesn't care. They can just hire someone new to take over Todd's old job. But you can bet that the experience will leave Todd jaded as fuck. And in the future, when socialists with the actual capability to pull off a successful general strike calls for another general strike, you can bet your ass that all the Todds in the country will remember the experience of October 15th. And you can bet your ass that they'll all be sitting out of a would-be successful general strike.